Okay, we're live on YouTube. So I'm going to quickly go through who I have for attendance. And if I don't say your name, just let me know so I can add you to the list. I have Charles Welge, Fred Mastriani, Jen Hogan, Lisa Wallen, um, Zach Powell, Joe Emerald, Valerie Dean, Lisa Wallen, again, sorry, Rima Shamia, Rogerio Rodriguez, John Gillivan, John Demura, Carrie Ward, Jesse Vogel, Lindsay Garney, Andrew Tracy. Did I miss anybody? Oh, I see. We have Jordan,
Ivan,
Ivan,
John Mitchell,
John Mitchell, Lynn, okay. I think that's it then. So, and if anyone else joins, I'll keep an eye on who's coming in and make sure I mark them in attendance. So good morning. Welcome to the March, what's today's date? 9th, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting. We have actually a couple of presentations today, so I want to get started pretty quickly. So first, the first presentation will be from Zach Powell from the City of Albany and Carrie Ward from Cdtc staff on the City of Albany Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. So Zach, if you're ready, Zach and Carrie, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Jen. I'm going to try and keep the presentation to a little over 10 minutes, but under 15 minutes, so we have plenty of time for people to ask questions at the end. Feel free to send chat messages during the presentation, and I'll try to answer the questions as we go through. One question that I'm sure most of you will have is whether or not the plan has been released yet. It's not been released yet, and I'll talk about this a little bit more towards the end of the presentation. So for anyone who doesn't know, I'm Zach Powell and I work as a senior planner for the City of Albany's Department of Planning and Development. Over the past year, I've been the city's project manager for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. And the plan was co-funded through Cdtc's 2019 to 2020 Community and Transportation Linkage Planning Program. And it was also funded through funds with the City of Albany. The primary consultant for the plan was Nelson Nygaard, and sub-consultants included Creighton Manning and Behan Planning and Design. And I also want to just give a shout out to some of the people who were part of the project that are here right now. We have Lindsay Garney, who is on our technical advisory committee. We also have Jesse Vogel, who is one of the project consultants with Creighton Manning. And we also have Jordan Solano-Reed, who was assisting with the project on behalf of Cdtc. So in 2019, the city developed the first bicycle master plan for the city. And since it had been 10 years since that plan was released and it was a 20-year plan, it seemed like the right time to update the network and recommendations to better reflect current needs. And as this plan was being updated, it also seemed like the right opportunity to develop a pedestrian master plan, since all people are pedestrians as part of their commute, and there are many shared issues, facilities, and policies that impact pedestrians and cyclists. And through both the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, it was crucial to ensure that the proposed networks, policies, and procedures serve people that rely on walking and cycling for daily trips. This was especially important since pedestrian and cycling policies, advocacy, and infrastructure can often appear just to support white, affluent people who use the facilities for recreational purposes. And in reality, people who experience a lot of transportation disadvantages are more than twice as likely to benefit from infrastructure and supportive policy for cyclists and pedestrians. Additionally, since the city's Common Council approved the equity agenda in 2019, this requires the city's Department of General Services to equitably distribute maintenance funds for street repairs and new sidewalks through all city wards. So aligning the plan with the agenda was important for future plan implementation as well. So while there's a large range of people that experience transportation disadvantages, the plan specifically identified and analyzed the impacts on people who don't have internet access, people who don't have access to a vehicle, lower wage earners, people with a limited English proficiency, people from communities of color, people under 18 or over 65, and people with one or more disabilities. So as part of developing recommended routes and policies for the plan, I'm going to be going through some of the highlights of Creighton Manning and Nelson Nygaard's review of existing conditions, as well as some of the public input collected through the outreach process. For the project team's review of existing conditions, they examined existing plans, policies, and infrastructure, local and state crash data involving cyclists and pedestrians within the city, a demand analysis for where people are currently and want to walk and cycle in the city, and they conducted an equity analysis to see how current infrastructure crashes and the demand analysis relate to census tracts that have a higher percentage of households that experience transportation disadvantages as compared to the city average. So for the 2009 network, the consultants found that only 40% of the network had been completed, with half of the completed network only consisting of sharrows, which are the pavement markings that you can see on the image on the right. The consultants also looked at how comfortable the 2009 network would be for cyclists and found that the majority of the network had an LTS, and that stands for level of traffic stress of 3 or more. 50% of the network was classified as an LTS of 3, which is suitable for people who are confident and enthusiastic cyclists, not so much for people who are interested but concerned. Looking at the existing pedestrian network, the majority of streets east of Breveter Street had 1 or 2 sidewalks along each street, and west of Breveter, there was much lower sidewalk coverage in the more suburban portions of the city. In the demand analysis, which utilized city and census data, demand is highest in the eastern and central portions of the city, along with the Harriman and Uptown University at Albany campus, with the highest demand for individuals who rely on walking and cycling being around Central Avenue and downtown. The equity analysis found that bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure was generally evenly distributed between low, medium, and high sensitivity environmental justice census tracts, but the proportion of accidents involving pedestrians and cyclists is higher in high sensitivity tracts. So transitioning into the public outreach, the goal for the plan was to utilize extensive in-person outreach and conduct multiple demonstration events to get as much participation as possible from communities who are traditionally not included in planning projects. COVID-19 required us to shift a lot of this outreach to a digital format, where our project website served as the central location for information and scheduling for upcoming events. From the project website, visitors could also use the project's wiki map, which allowed for people to make location-specific comments on something that looks like a Google map on issues related to walking, cycling, and signage. Overall, 624 people visited the wiki map, and 100 people made 545 contributions to the map. So towards the beginning of our outreach over last summer, Behan Planning and Design led 6 neighborhood meetings over Zoom, which included discussions and interactive polling. While a total of 135 people attended the neighborhood meetings, lower turnout in some of the meetings required our department and staff from Cdtc to do additional outreach through focus groups and surveying over the phone and in person while socially distanced. And one of the more interactive outreach methods we used for this project was holding 2 demonstration projects, one at Breveter Street and Melrose Avenue, and as you can see on the image on the right, one at Morton Avenue and Eagle Street. Both demonstration projects included curb extensions using tape and flexible delineators, which are those white poles that you can see in the image, and new permanent crosswalk installations with the help from our city's Division of Traffic Engineering. The demonstration along Melrose Avenue also included other elements that are traditional to bicycle boulevards, which I'll go into a little bit later if anyone's not familiar with what a bicycle boulevard is. Demonstration projects were installed for 3-day periods and included times where they were staffed and unstaffed. So from these analyses that were done by Creighton Manning and Nelson Nygaard and through the public outreach, some of the major themes that developed were that the majority of the 2009 bicycle master plan network utilized major roads that would require a higher level of protection for people to feel comfortable cycling / make existing cyclists feel safe. Since there was a limited implementation of this network and the majority of the network that was implemented was relatively small through sharrows, It's unlikely that the network would be completed as proposed in 2009 within the next 10 years, given the necessary time, funding, and public outreach. Many people we spoke to and received comments from noted that they didn't feel safe riding or walking since there's poor communication with drivers and there's not a culture of compassion towards pedestrian and cyclists. And one of the biggest findings from the project is while there might be existing infrastructure in place, there are a number of policies, procedures, and cultural shifts that'll need to happen to ensure that existing facilities are accessible, well-connected, and safe. So from these findings, I'm going to quickly show you the proposed bicycle and pedestrian networks. So on the map, there are a number of different types of facilities with bicycle boulevards in yellow, conventional bicycle lanes in magenta, protected buffered bike lanes in blue, paved multi-use paths or trails in green, and non-paved multi-use paths or trails in orange. There are also routes that have dotted lines indicating that the type of facility and the location of the alignment will need to be determined through a future project, and existing facilities are noted with bolded lines. The primary type of facility in the network is a bicycle boulevard, with protected and buffered bicycle lanes being the next most common type of facility. The goal of the plan was to provide a level of traffic stress of 1 or 2 for the majority of the network, and this is good for people who are interested but concerned, and maybe cycling for kids and families. So for anyone who's not familiar with bicycle boulevards, and we had a lot of questions about bicycle boulevards come up during the project, they're facilities that are located on low traffic neighborhood streets that utilize a combination of treatments to provide an easily identifiable, low stress route that improves the travel experience for both pedestrians and cyclists. In the graphic on the right, this is the 4th Street Bicycle Boulevard in Koreatown, Los Angeles. The Bicycle Boulevard utilizes wayfinding signage that you can see in the bottom left, new stop signs, pavement markings, a traffic diverter, curb extensions, and a bioswale in the center. These types of treatments for all types of bicycle boulevards can vary based on the intersection and the issues that are experienced along the corridor or at the intersection. So this allows for a lot of opportunities to customize a bicycle boulevard to local needs. So moving on to the pedestrian network map, the majority of the proposed improvements are in the southern and western portions of the city that don't have any or a limited amount of sidewalks. Sidewalks being proposed on one side of the road are shown in orange, and sidewalks proposed on both sides of the road are shown in the dark blue. So some of the major recommended policies and procedures included working with communities that experience transportation disadvantages to develop projects that are context sensitive. This is really important to ensure that projects are done with the community and not to the community. And if it's done to the community, it can create concerns for gentrification, whitewashing, and missing out on potential safety issues related to police enforcement. In keeping with that, working with enforcement officials to modify policies to not enforce certain policies when there are not safe facilities on a street and when non-compliance doesn't create a safety issue. Removing the fear of police enforcement for non-compliance can help make cyclists feel safer when traveling. And as part of the plan, the consultants have developed a list of all the recommended bicycle and pedestrian projects and prioritize them based on whether it connects to an existing facility, whether it's in a census tract that experiences higher levels of transportation disadvantages, whether it connects to a school or park, and whether it serves an area with high demand or areas with high levels of crashes. Using this list along with design guidance from the city's Complete Streets Guide will help improve coordination when the city seeks grant funding and coordinating projects that happen within the city. One of the other recommendations was to develop a citywide wayfinding program that's consistent and easy to use. This will be more likely now that the city's got the new branded material, as you can see through this PowerPoint. Another one of the recommendations was to increase the number of educational opportunities and improve shared awareness and responsibility for road safety, and developing more robust maintenance procedures and performance standards for existing infrastructure to better understand the city's needs for future projects and budgeting. So I'm going to quickly go through next steps. Our project team is currently working on an executive summary for the plan, and we hope to release the plan within the month. While this was a relatively short time frame for the plan, our department's going to be continuing work on pedestrian and cyclist safety through demonstration projects this year, so stay tuned for those. And the city is currently working on these bicycle and pedestrian projects as well. So there are a number of new projects and plans to look forward to in the near future. And I saw one chat message, and this was from Rima that says, does the plan identify specific intersections that would get treatments like the LA Koreatown Bicycle Boulevard treatment? So not specific, there are specific intersection improvements that are proposed, but not specifically for bicycle boulevards. You know, as you can see on the map showing the bicycle network, I think that's something that'll be determined when those routes have improvements made to them and they're designated as a bicycle boulevard. I don't see any other chat questions, so.
Zach, there was one question, will the slides be made available?
Yeah, I can send those out. And John Mitchell asked whether the Albany Bicycle Coalition and the New York State Bicycle Coalition were participating. I definitely know that, you know, we had a member from ABC on one of the advisory committees, and I believe we got written comments from the New York State Bicycle Coalition and participation in the meetings.
So the plan will identify routes and like the types of routes that are being recommended, but it's not necessarily recommending like treatments per route, right? That's all going to be worked out like in the design implementation process.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, because I think that was one of the important things that kind of distinguishes the 2009 plan and this one, is that there were streets that were identified to have, you know, a facility. It didn't really specify what facility in the 2009 plan. So this provided a little more specificity to recognize, you know, what's going on with the road, what's the traffic volume, and what are the safety features needed to make people actually feel safe to use those routes.
Mm-hmm. And the city and Cdtc and the consultant team, you know, you guys were pulling this together through really like the thick of the pandemic. So there was no in-person, you know, besides some of the demonstrations and stuff. Can you, I mean, do you think that through virtual and like all the creative ways that the city did outreach, you got a good number of responses and participation?
Yeah, so Carrie actually did some in-person outreach as well with Catholic Charities. So we were able to get some in-person feedback while being socially distanced. You know, I think it was, I think Zoom and other digital formats provide a really good opportunity to connect with more people, maybe people who physically can't leave their homes and normally can't go you know, to a public meeting or to a demonstration project. You know, this was in the thick of COVID as well, but there were, you know, a lot of Black Lives Matter protests and a lot of other big issues going on at the time. So I think I would say it's not as much COVID that maybe had some issues in us connecting with people. I think people just had a lot of big priorities going on over the summer and the fall when we were doing a lot of our outreach. So, you know, that's why we're continuing with the demonstration projects this year. And, you know, hopefully there'll be more time to reach out to people. We did try to follow up for any gaps that we saw in communities or neighborhoods that we weren't able to reach through the larger neighborhood meetings with the focus groups and the in-person and phone surveys as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. Are there any other questions from anyone?
Instead of hunting and pecking, getting my chat in, did you get a chance to check with Albany Bike Coalition how their mapping system matches with the proposals that you're providing?
Yeah, and actually the Bicycle Coalition kind of put out a list of desired improvements and routes and policies, you know, and a lot of the plan aligns with that. You know, it's something, you know, as part of the project, our consultants and our project team looked at the ABC biking route as well. And, you know, and a lot of times the public comments that we received from people aligned with that as well. So it was a good tool to just reinforce a lot of kind of what we already knew. But it's helpful to have that, and you know, it was a great start, and it's been a great tool that they've been able to share with people who are new, who are maybe not as familiar with best routes to take within the city.
Thank you.
All right. It looks like there's no other questions. So thank you, Zach. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Sure. I am going to. Can people see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you just see like one slide, or do you see a slide and a side note?
Just one.
Okay.
One slide.
Super. So we skipped this stuff in the beginning, but I'm just gonna go through it really quickly, and then we have a short presentation from Ivan, and then another presentation on mobility impacts, but just some COVID-19 updates. The only thing that has changed is that the Cdtc office, we've been closed for a few months now, but we are going to try to reopen again the week of April 5th. This, of course, is mostly for staff because we won't have in-person meetings quite yet, but we are in the process of transitioning back to hopeful normalcy, whatever that shall mean. And we still have a COVID-19 recovery resource page, and as communities are preparing for spring and summer, and might still be looking to do some social distance, outdoor reconfigurations of streets or sidewalks. There are tools on the Cdtc website that are available for local governments, and you can always reach out if you have questions. So the next presentation we have is actually on the Rossi Junction project, and Ivan Vamos is going to talk a bit about this. I apologize because I had hoped for Ivan to talk about this last meeting, and I did provide this as a handout, but we kind of rushed through the meeting and weren't able to cover it. So Ivan, if you want to.
Well, thank you. It's all the better because we're a little bit better prepared at this point. First, group of us, including people you may know, like myself and Henry Pearbrun, who was deputy commissioner at DOT, and a number of others, Jeff Olson, who many of you know, are on this committee that are working on trying to get some sort of a recollection of Lou Rossi, who was DOT's director of planning, but did a great deal to focus the state on changing to a much more proactive way of operating with pedestrians and bicyclists. This beginning in the 1980s was able to transfer to the federal government through Senator Moynihan and he was a main force in changing how the Federal Transportation Act, the Surface Transportation Act, treats bicycles and pedestrians in the early 1990s. So a lot of the things we're doing here with Cdtc and other parts of the state and the nation are related to his efforts, successful efforts, I may say, judging by, for instance, what Albany has proposed. We selected a corner of the Corning Preserve part of the bike route that's actually owned by Office of General Services. It's the southern corner. It's a triangular piece of property. On your right, you see a small version of that, but you probably have passed it many times. It was designed basically as a paved area with two concrete benches, but very little relationship to the rest of the park system. So it wasn't a bad design for the first 30 years. But now it turns out that OGS has to redo their pumps. That's the funny looking building. It looks like the Aztecs built it on the left side of your screen, on the north side of that little triangular property. So there'll be construction going on there to these now 40-year-old pumps. So the area will be used by construction people, but they have to restore the property to a standard. We have gotten Scott Lewenden, who many of you know from very many projects in the area, and who initially worked on the bike route here in the 1970s, to volunteer his time for various designs. At the moment, we have gotten agreement from OGS, New York State Office of General Services, to do something in the lower southern corner of that triangular property, while the rest of the property will be managed by the contractor and will be restored or rebuilt in a better way. So once the pump work gets completed, a year or a year and a half or 2 years from now, we will be looking for added ways of improving that property. For the moment, we will add at least a bench and a new bike rack, which through donations we hope to provide, but we will hope to get additional help from Cdtc and the funds that we are able to get a hold of, probably in about 2 years of time for the rest of this property. It needs better place to put your bikes. It needs a better place to stop. Since this is the green is the bike route currently, and it needs a recognition that this is where a whole batch of trails come together. The Erie Canal State Bike Route, Empire State Trail, the Champlain Canal Trail ends up more or less here. The state on-road bike routes 5 and 9 all come together, as well as our own Heldberg Hudson bike route, which has connected to that green line. So it will be an important site. We are hoping that some of you might be, particularly ones that remember Lou Rossi, might be willing to provide some additional donations. It will be managed through New York Bicycle Coalition, nybc.net. Please read about him in the stuff that's with your current agenda. Thank you for the time. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Ivan. So this was in the handout, the handout, the meeting materials, and it will be with the notes again. So Please, if you're interested, visit the links that are provided and the information here that Ivan discussed. If anyone has any quick comments or questions. Okay, thank you, Ivan.
Thank you.
So our next presentation will be from Andrew Tracy about mobility trends in the Capital District related to COVID. So Andrew, I think that you are, yep,
Can you see everything?
I can see your slide. So
Okay.
take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Jen. I will present another update of the data sources I have that illustrate the impact COVID has had on transportation in the Capital District. I've updated a bunch of the data sources. Those are at the end, but first I'd like to show you some slides from presentations at TRB, the Transportation Research Board meeting that was held in January. It was the 100th anniversary of TRB, but it was all held virtually this year online. And one of the major themes discussed at the TRB meeting was COVID. There were 60 different sessions relating to COVID there was a curated program for all of the COVID sessions. I watched many of them, and I'll show you some of the slides that I saw that I thought provided interesting insights. The TRB slides are mainly national trends, and at the end of my slideshow, I'll show you the updated local data as well. So first, there was a presentation from researchers, including researchers from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and they conducted a very broad national survey, many thousands of participants, including over 1,000 participants in New York State. And they asked them a battery of questions relating to COVID and found the trends you see here. It was a longitudinal survey. They were able to follow the same group of people before and during COVID. And they found a very, very profound change in mode choice. As you can see here, there was a considerable move away from private vehicles to work from home or not commuting. And there was also a considerable move away from transit use. And that was one of the themes that I heard a lot of at many of the sessions, and that's reflected in the local data as well. Transit use fell heavily during the pandemic, and it hasn't yet recovered. More data from the same survey. They asked all the participants what they perceive as high risk or low risk activities during COVID. And they found that riding in public transportation and traveling on an airplane were perceived as the highest risk activities amongst all the survey takers. So this points to a very likely reason why transit use has fallen. Individuals who have a choice about whether they use transit or another mode may choose to use another mode. In that very same survey, they found that walking or bicycling was perceived as the least risky activity, pointing to a possible reason why we saw an increase in walking and biking nationally during COVID. One of the other common themes that was touched on by a lot of presentations at TRB was the very rapid rise in e-commerce seen, especially during the early months of COVID. During only the first 3 months of the pandemic, there was an increase in e-commerce that was roughly equivalent to the 10 years of growth prior. And the peak e-commerce share was 34% of all retail sales, and it peaked in April of 2020. Over the entire year of 2020, e-commerce share was 21%, which was much higher than any year prior. Total sales were up 40%. And also interestingly is that Amazon's share, Amazon.com's share of e-commerce actually fell. Their total volume increased, but there were greater gains from all of the non-Amazon retailers. So people are diversifying their online purchases more. Amazon's share fell from about half down to about a third in 2020. So this was very interesting. It was discussed in a number of presentations, and it's, you know, coupled with this was a rise in local delivery vehicle as well. So one of the reasons why it seems that even though people are working from home, there may be just as much traffic as we're used to. One of the reasons for that, the researchers posited, was there was a very large growth in local delivery vehicle traffic. Another researcher from UC Davis conducted a national survey again, asking a number of questions. And a couple of the interesting trends that I pulled out: first, adoption of telehealth services. Prior to COVID, most of us had never used remote health or telehealth services. But during the fall of 2020, the survey was conducted again, and it was found that actually a small majority of doctor visits, health checkups, were conducted remotely via telehealth, either over the phone or over Zoom or through some other remote method. So this is very interesting, and researchers think that some of this might stick around after COVID if individuals find it much more convenient to just call up their doctor or use a video conferencing service to speak to a doctor or a nurse. That may be a good way of getting some cars off the road and making healthcare more convenient. The same survey had an interesting revelation about work from home. They asked everybody, all of the survey respondents, if the nature of their job required them to physically go to work. And they found a pretty big discrepancy in work from home opportunity versus income. What they found was that low income individuals, the majority of them felt that they had to be physically present at their job in order to do it. And the opposite was true for high income individuals, where a majority of them felt that they did not need to be present at their job. So this perhaps shows greater work from home opportunity among high income individuals, which would impact commuting trends, but also has ramifications for just workplace safety and who is exposed to COVID. And this is the last slide I'll show, showing data from TRB. One of the most surprising things about COVID is that even though in March, April, and May, traffic volumes were much, much lower than any year prior, traffic collisions actually increased. And I think this surprised a lot of people. The expectation was that, for example, in April, when traffic volumes were about half of what they were the year prior, you would expect to see about half as many crashes because there's half as much VMT, but that wasn't the case. According to the National Safety Council, for the first 6 months of 2020, even though traffic volumes were down nationally, crashes were actually up 17% during that period. And if you look at the rate of traffic crashes per million VMT, National Safety Council found the rate of crashes went up 34%, which is pretty surprising, and it's a pretty large spike in crashes. So a lot of the researchers looked into this and tried to determine causes, and one researcher from NACTO found that there were 4 crash types that saw significant increases in fatality rates from years prior. Those were rollovers, ejected passengers, single vehicle crashes, and speeding related crashes. And so a lot of the wisdom shared was that when traffic volumes went down, speeding went up, reckless driving went up. Traffic has, even the traffic itself has something of a traffic calming effect. And when people have the road all to themselves, they tend to drive recklessly. So this is, as I mentioned, one of the more surprising revelations from COVID, and something that a lot of researchers had been grappling with, especially with relation to bike ped safety. with a lot of the cars off the road in urban areas, people were able to drive much more quickly. So a lot of cities across the country were getting very creative with traffic calming measures they could implement to try to slow folks down. So now I'll go through some of the local data sources that I've updated. First, Google's mobility trend report. This is the report for Albany County, but the data is similar for nearby counties as well. They still see that compared to the pre-COVID baseline, there's a reduction in retail trips, and likely a corresponding rise in e-commerce as we saw earlier. Still about 47% fewer folks are using Google Maps to route to transit stations, and still 41% fewer trips reported by Google to workplaces. So work from home as of last week still seems to be largely in effect. Similarly, Apple Maps is continuing to update their mobility reports. And what we see is pretty much business as usual for the last few months, with the exception of transit, which is still down 27%, according to Apple, over the pre-COVID baseline. Taking a look at local transit, Cdtc publishes monthly ridership figures in their monthly performance reports. This is the performance report from February, and what we can see is that there was, obviously a big initial decline in transit use in May and April of 2020. That recovered somewhat in the summer, declined again in the winter, still has not yet recovered to where it was a year ago. The historical average ridership for this time of year is about 1.2 million riders. And the current ridership is only about 700,000. So individuals who have some choice on whether they use transit may still be choosing not to. And finally, I have 3 slides showing the traffic volumes from the 3 permanent count stations maintained by Region 1 in the area. First, on Route 9 in Latham, we actually saw a significant decline in traffic volume in March, April, May of last year, but recovery to its pre-COVID baseline around about August of 2020, and it's remained there ever since. So at least on Route 9, traffic has been back to normal for several months. Wolf Road tells a different story, though. There's a couple of gaps in the data here where you see those straight lines, but as of the most recent data provided through the end of the calendar year 2020 by Region 1, traffic had not yet recovered to its pre-COVID levels on Wolf Road. And folks are suggesting this is likely because of the land uses on Wolf Road. There may be many folks still working from home at all of the offices, still fewer folks choosing to go out to restaurants or retail. So we'll continue to monitor Wolf Road to see if it's ever going to recover to its pre-COVID volumes. And finally, the traffic monitoring station on the Northway north of Saratoga Springs, similar to Route 9, saw a very early recovery in traffic volumes around July of 2020, and volumes have remained at that level ever since. So it's worth pointing out as well that even though overall volumes may have recovered on some regional roadways, there has likely been a shift in when the trips are occurring. What we see nationally is fewer trips in the traditional rush hours and more trips in the midday. And my very last slide here, I'll just discuss one of our upcoming tasks. We've been approved to spend some of our work program funding on traffic counts. And so we will be conducting traffic counts throughout the region for a number of purposes, including monitoring traffic for return to normal or new normal, We're going to be conducting counts throughout the region at places where we have pre-COVID data to see how traffic has shifted, to see which roadways have gained traffic or lost traffic or remained roughly the same, to see how traffic has changed over the time of day. We expect to see more midday trips and fewer trips in the traditional morning and evening rush hours. And we'll also be conducting counts at roadways that serve sectors of the economy that may have been most impacted by COVID to see how traffic has shifted. So as planners, we need to get a good handle on how traffic has shifted in the long term. As vaccines are rolling out, we'll be seeing more and more of a return to normalcy, and we want to know what the long-term permanent impact on travel has been in the region. So we'll be conducting counts at roadways serving a number of sectors of the economy that may have been permanently changed by COVID. So this RFP is a work in progress. We hope to issue it sometime soon, conduct our counts, and then I'll be putting together a little report detailing how travel has shifted throughout the region due to COVID. So that was my final slide. Thank you very much, everybody, and I'll turn things back over to Jen.
Thanks, Andrew. I do think that the interesting thing about the mobility impacts, while we do see volumes recovering, like Andrew said, the shift to the types of trips and the time of day, kind of shifting away from those peak hour trips, it can, and depending on how, how long lasting these impacts are, could shift how we respond to some of our transportation obstacles and issues. Because if it's not all the system is built around commuting trips, and if that's not the only kinds of trips, and if there are more of other types of trips, there may be other types of ways to close the gaps in the system. So, okay, so to go back to our slides and get through the agenda. So the next thing on the agenda is the 2021 linkage program grants. So last week at policy board, it was approved to fund these 3 East Greenbush, Troy, and Rensselaer projects. And there's more information about these on the Cdtc website in the policy board minutes, but I can include an attachment in our notes. For the Capital Coexist mini grants, we did provide kind of a mini summary of the mini grants last time, but we have not reached out to everyone who submitted a project. So we're not announcing, who was funded or not funded yet, but these are the project sponsors and the types of projects that were proposed, and we're in the process of contacting everyone. And hopefully by next month, we'll be able to announce what the final projects are. So Smart Communities task, this is something we've talked about a little bit. We had an open solicitation for communities to submit project proposals to do smart cities studies or projects. And we did hear from a handful of communities, but given everything that was going on, there wasn't a lot of, this wasn't a priority for submitting an application. So we decided to shift to doing a regional project. And instead of doing a city-based or town or village-based project, we have an REI out for consultant services to develop a smart cities toolbox. And really the goals of this would be to define what smart cities means, and not just smart cities in general, but what we mean in the capital region when we talk about smart cities. I think sometimes there's some confusion about what smart cities is, high tech versus low tech versus just using data that we may already have differently to improve operations and planning. But the toolbox will identify kind of like low-hanging fruit, things that could be easy for capital region communities to implement. It'll provide case studies, so similar size and types of communities that have successfully implemented projects, and then provide an implementation roadmap. So we do think that this will be helpful to communities as they are, receive questions from the public, but also from vendors who are trying to either sell or test new technologies and things in their communities. So for Bike Month, we had a long discussion at last month's meeting about, what could we do for Bike Month? And I know Rima's on the call now. If you want, I don't mean to put you on the spot. So if you want to pass on this, you don't have to, but if you want to give a quick update on this.
Yeah, that's no, that's fine. I was expecting to. So let me move my screen here. I can't. We've been developing a Ditch the Car campaign concept that this year will be in lieu of Bike to Work Day. We're looking at holding the Ditch the Car campaign from May to October to cover the Bike to School, or not Bike to School, the Walk to School Day national event. So it'll be, it'll span multiple seasons, and it'll be sort of like in incentive based. I'm hoping to develop a web interface where people can register and then log trips, and be able to keep track of how many trips of what type that they take, and see, what other people who are involved in the campaign are doing, and hopefully have some like fun incentives to offer, people who log certain numbers of trips or certain types of trips or in certain places. So that is in development. And the hope and expectation would be that in future years, post-pandemic, we would be able to do the Bike to Work Challenge in May or June, and then follow that by like an annual Ditch the Car campaign, so that we could keep it, have a longer like summer into fall event, as well as the Bike to Work.
Great, thanks, Rima.
Yeah.
As we have more information, we'll continue to provide it to the advisory committee. So the next topic we have is the MUTCD. So we've mentioned this a couple of times, but there's more information available, and Jordan and Sandy from our office put together a fact sheet that is of particular interest to our committee, and I'll send it out with the meeting notes today. So with this MUTCD update, there are 132 substantive revisions, and it introduces 37 new traffic control device applications. There's updates on technical provisions to reflect advances in technologies and recent trends, and automated driving systems. So considerations for agencies to prepare roadways for automated vehicles, and support their safe deployment. They are not standardizing areas important to automated vehicles at this time, and agencies should adopt systemic traffic control device maintenance policies and/or practices. And they're just yesterday or recently, there 3 webinars were announced to discuss specific recommendations and updates to the MUTCD. So March 11th, an introduction and overview. Next week, the pedestrians, bicycles, and transit, and then the 25th urban traffic control. You can register for these. They are through Federal Highway. And again, the links to these and information about these will be in the notes. And the comment period on the update to the MUTCD, as we mentioned at the last meeting, was extended to May 14th.
Hey, Jen, could I just jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
As you were talking about this topic, I got an email from Federal Highway that they had to push all 3 webinars out by 1 week. So I'll get Jen the updated information with the correct dates.
Thank you. Okay. Just making myself a note so I don't forget that. Okay. So here are some key changes that we thought you would be interested. Improvements to safety and accessibility for pedestrians. So the location of push buttons that signalize crosswalks, crosswalk marking patterns, and accommodations in work zones. So remember, the objective of the MUTCD is to create some uniformity in the traffic, in the transportation system in terms of lines and signs and devices. So the MUTCD is what local engineers and planners use when they are implementing roadway design projects and changes. So these are, key changes to bike and ped things. Also expanded traffic control devices to improve safety and operation for bicyclists. So intersection bicycle boxes, 2-stage turn boxes, bicycle traffic signal faces, and new design, which isn't here, but for the US bicycle route sign. And some of these things we, like bike boxes we've seen, but some, a lot of things we've been using as, I don't know if it would be considered interim approval or I'm completely blanking on the word, but there are things that aren't completely approved to MUTCD that we have been using as like on a testing basis. But additionally, there's also the incorporation of provisional traffic control devices that are currently under interim approval. And these include the pedestrian actuated rectangular rapid flashing beacons at uncontrolled marked crosswalks. We do have some of those in the region. The green colored pavement for bike lanes, which you've probably seen in Albany and Madison Avenue. Red colored pavement for transit lanes, and new traffic signal warrant based on crash experience. So if you are interested in the updates and recommended changes to the MUTCD, it's been over 10 years, I believe, since there's been any updates. I do recommend that you register for a webinar, which will provide the updated information on that, or give it a review. We'll provide a link to the materials and submit comments. If folks have questions or comments about this that they feel are important for the capital region and want to have a discussion, we can certainly do that as well and provide some notes or comments on the MUTCD as a committee. Okay, the next agenda item is CDTC's public participation plan. This was adopted last week at policy board. So moving forward, this is our participation plan. We've talked about this briefly, but it does really highlight and elevate the importance of equity and integrating equity and from public involvement into project scopes. And there's a lot of strategy recommendations, things that CDTC has used that we feel have been effective, but have been innovative and we would like to use more often. And then also things we haven't been able to use, but maybe would like to use in the future. So if you are doing public outreach, while this is CDTC's policy, there's information in here that I think could be helpful to anyone who's just interested in expanding their public participation process. New Visions 2050, we are continuing to do outreach, and there are opportunities for training and virtual learning. Local planning boards, zoning boards can request a training, and these trainings can be tailored to different topics within New Visions or things that are very specific to things that planning boards or zoning boards covered. These can also be approved for credits through the Department of State for land use training. So those have to be approved at the local level, but we can work with you and schedule something virtually for your town board, zoning board, planning board, or any community group. The New Visions Virtual Learning Series, which is a webinar series that's held on the third Tuesday of every month. March 16th is the next webinar, and it'll be on region and on traffic safety. It's called Moving Towards Zero: Approaches to Improving Safety. So we'll have Sandy Misowitz from our staff, as well as someone from DOT talking about our local road safety plan and what DOT is doing in terms of safety. April 20th, the topic is performance measures. So we'll have both Cdtc staff and federal highways talking about this. And then May, of course, is Bike Month. So it will be on expanding bicycling in the capital region and what communities can do to continue to make their communities more bike friendly. So in terms of ongoing Cdtc planning initiatives and their status, we heard today from the city of Albany on the bicycle pedestrian master plan. If there's anyone on the call that wants to talk about their ongoing linkage project, feel free to. I know this gives like a brief summary, but if anyone has, expanded details on their project, feel free to jump in and talk about it.
I can speak briefly on the Boston Spa bicycle pedestrian plan.
Okay.
It's officially kicked off as of early 2021, and meetings have begun, and we're currently collecting existing conditions data. As the project moves forward, it will look at ways to improve safety for Boston Spa and bicycle and pedestrian routes and connections, improving accessibility and safety, particularly at intersections and in a lot of their older and historic corridors, and ultimately also trying to tie into the Zim Smith Trail in Saratoga County.
Great.
And that's it for that for now. There will be more updates as the project moves along, but we're still in the relatively early stages. So.
Thanks, Jordan. And then for the Community Planning Technical Assistance Program, this is a joint program, just as a reminder, between Cdtc and CDRPC. We did have a presentation on the Gilligan Road Complete Streets enhancements, and that's complete. And if you're interested in those other projects, the information is in this spreadsheet. Also, other things that may be of interest. So the ADA transition plan assistance, I believe this has been opened back up, and there's the ability to do one more. I know Carrie, you're on here if you want to add anything about that.
Yeah, so we reopened the application. Since we have a new budget year, we, I believe, would be able to fund one of the larger municipalities, one of the municipalities that has a large sidewalk network in the region, and the deadline that we set now is at the end of April. So hopefully we would be able to get at least most of the data collection done before the snow flies again.
Great, thanks, Carrie. And then also the Patroon Greenway project, we did receive quite a few responses to the REI for that project, and we will be evaluating them and hopefully moving forward with choosing a consultant in the next few weeks. A new project that we haven't mentioned, we are working with Albany County. We have a contract with them directly to look at the feasibility of the Albany County Loop Trail, which was identified in the Capital District Trails Plan. So that's basically following County Route 155 from about Voorheesville into Colony, and we have broken it up into segments, and we're looking at this. What are the opportunities for incorporating some potential when we say trail, it could be an on-road treatment or a multi-use path or off-road treatment, but we are looking at doing a existing conditions inventory and report right now. So it is 10:10. So today I was a little bit worried about how much time we would have at the end today. And since last week, we really had to rush through, and I apologize for that. If anyone has an update that they want to give, we have about 15 minutes to do that. Otherwise, our next meeting is scheduled for April 13th at 9 a.m.
Jen, I could give a quick update on Cycle Schenectady, my fledgling organization that's about a year old.
Sure.
As Andrew said back in the fall, the Gazette newspaper had a story about people speeding and the dangerous streets problem. And I saw that as an opportunity to join forces with a umbrella neighborhood organization in Schenectady because we had common interest in slowing traffic down. So we did an online petition and got letters of support and things like that, and came up with a big wish list. But the major things were complete streets legislation and ordinances and a whole mindset on the part of the city for complete streets. It's not enough just to have something on the books. You have to actually believe it and do it. Another one was reducing the default city speed limit, at least in residential neighborhoods, from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour, which takes home rule legislation. But we also found out that there is a bill in the legislature in both chambers now that would give municipalities the option of doing so on their own without DOT's approval. So the city council passed a resolution of support in favor of that at our urging. And the third thing we were after was implementation of the bike master plan, which was adopted in 2017 and has pretty much sat on the shelf. Nothing's been done. So we're getting some traction and some support. We've made statements during privilege of the floor at the city council meetings. And at the city's initiative, we had a Zoom meeting with the mayor and the city engineer and the director of planning. And they started by saying they were in favor of complete streets and ended by saying they were in favor of implementing the bike master plan. In the middle, they pretty much listened to us and offered nothing and really committed to nothing. The only outcome was that resolution of support that I referred to before. But they agreed to participate in a upcoming Zoom meeting, a presentation on the bike master plan on March 31st that your Rima was involved in when she was with the city planning department. So she's going to lead it, and the city engineer and planning department director are going to participate. So we're excited about that. And finally, there's been a Greenway between Central Park and downtown Schenectady, a distance of about 2 miles, that's been in place for about 8 years with absolutely no signage. Nobody even knows it exists. So I got the Metroplex chairman to fund that, and he's putting in signs. And just yesterday, they sent me what they're going to go by, which is Empire State Trail standards. And so we're working on that. And that's my update.
Thanks, Art. Anyone else have a project or program update they want to discuss? All right. So thank you everyone for attending today. I think March of 2020 was our last in-person Bike Ped meeting. So next month will be our 1-year anniversary of all virtual meetings. And everyone has been great. And we've really seen quite a bit a new participation or just people who usually couldn't come to our meetings being able to sign on and join us here. So it's been good to see everybody, even though we haven't been able to meet in the same room together for a year now. So I hope everyone is staying safe and getting vaccinated if they can. And I will see you all April 9th next month. But
Jen.
is it April 9th? No,
Thank
April
you.
13th. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Thanks, John.